Greetings, everybody.
Recording in progress.
Whoops. Okay. So, greetings, everybody. Thank you for coming out to our Success and Giving Back event. This event was created by a lot of people. The committee of the Black History Month Planning Committee, OSL, a lot of more organizations that I'm gonna forget to name now. But thank you for coming to this event. We have special guest here today, which we will introduce in a minute. My name is Kaya Petit, senior finance major attending Baruch College, also the president of NABA Baruch. Daniela, I'll give you the mic.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. I am Daniela Toribio. I am the coordinator of Student Affairs for Baruch New Initiative for the Study of Latin America, ISLA, and we are very happy to be here today. So Kayel, please introduce our wonderful speakers.
Definitely. So we have three wonderful speakers here. First being Latoya Niles, second being Paula Hayward, and third Al Benoit. We prepared brief introductions on each one of our guest speakers, but we will also allow them to speak for themselves as well. So I will start with Latoya. Latoya currently serves as a senior advisor for the executive deputy commissioner with the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development. In this role, she assists the agency with interdisciplinary projects and implementing the organization's strategy and priorities. She also works with the Mashulu Preservation Corporation as the Assistant Director of Community and Economic Development. Now, Paula Hayward. Paula Hayward completed an MBA at Peace University in Strategic Management. She is the founder and CEO of Elevate Group, LLC, which is a human capital strategy consulting firm with a mission to reduce the lingering impacts of social and racial inequalities experienced in the professional world. And now, Al Benoit. Al Benoit is a native New York who grew up in Queens and graduated from Baruch College with a BA in marketing. He joined his first agency, Young and Rubicam, over the next 7 years, he developed an award-winning plans and drove revenue growth at full service agency. He worked on brands like Advil, CDC's Verb campaign, and MLK Jr. Memorial, encompassing a breadth of business goals and targets. So now I will open up the floor for our guests to introduce themselves. I guess we could start with Latoya.
Sure. I guess to add a little bit of color to the titles, um, I, as stated, work as a senior advisor at the city right now. But considering the fact that I joined my role of leading lots of special projects a few months before COVID hit the city, it has meant that I've worked on a lot of different projects that relate to COVID and the different budgetary concerns that the agency is going through right now. So, as well as a lot of the actual DEI initiatives that the agency is working on cross collaborating with others within the economic development and planning spheres. So I've gotten a chance to really get my feet wet, although I've only been in this role for a little over a year.
Thank you, Latoya. Paula.
Thank you. As you mentioned, my name is Paula Haywood. I'd like to let everyone know that I'm an immigrant. I came to this country to attend Baruch. I'm from Jamaica, West Indies, and upon graduated, I worked in the finance industry for some years in the hedge fund industry and firms like JP Morgan and Bank of America. And then recently, upon completing my master's in strategic management, I decided to start my own company, Elevate Group. The main reason for that is based on what was happening in our society, especially last year, and the lingering effects of the opportunities gap as it relates to people of color. I wanted to somewhat help to close that gap and provide people of color with a pathway to success, whether it's on college campus and also once they start their professional career, especially in corporate America. I also volunteer a lot as well. I currently serve as the first vice president for the National Association of Black Accountants New York chapter, where I do a lot of work in helping our community and professionals and students in the field of both accounting, finance, and other business areas to develop professionally and help them with their personal development. And that's where I also interact with a lot of students from Baruch as well.
Thank you, Paula. Last but certainly not least, Al.
Thank you. Al Benoit. I am New York native, product of immigrants, responsible at points in my career for $300 million in advertising spending for Subway restaurants, Sprint. But those were the technical aspects. In regards to what I usually tell people in my first 60 seconds is I am a product of Haitian parents. So I have an immigrant mindset. I am a Baruch grad. So right off the bat, I'm smart. And I have the cultural competency that comes from being raised in Queens, a borough that has over 150 countries and languages represented. So when it comes to being able to be capable in this new world that we're moving towards, I'm prepared in those aspects. And in regards to some of my past service, I've done everything from the active and Baruch STAR program and related efforts to being on Baruch's marketing advisory board and helping with their curriculum content and engagement so that students can have better opportunities coming out of college, but also coach youth football and a range of advertising and technology industry programs that help to aggregate and or pull up people of color, especially those underrepresented.
Thank you so much to all our speakers for joining us and for sharing your very successful career experience and who you are as a person. We're very honored to have you with us. And as Kyle said, we would like to get to know you and your career path a little better. So our first question is on the theme of the event. How has your racial identity impacted your career path? Has it impacted? And if so, how? And Paula, will you mind taking the mic?
Sure, absolutely. I think my background of being African American, as well as being a woman, that has impacted my career path tremendously. First of all, in terms of being able to navigate the finance industry, it was somewhat difficult because a lot of people in that industry does not necessarily look like me. So oftentimes I was the only person of color in a room and having discussions with senior level executive. So although I knew within myself that I was capable, that I'm smart, of course, I went to Baruch. I also did well there, and I have the educational background in terms of my master's to perform well. I, to be honest, sometimes might have had a little bit of imposter syndrome in terms of, am I good enough? Am I deserving? Can I do this? And upon experiencing that, that is one of the main reasons why I decided to start my own company, because I realized that there are two folds when it comes to opportunities for people of color. One, it's institutionalized in that I'm sure you've been hearing what's happening in the media and as it relates to the gender wage gap, as well as racial inequality when it comes to pay structure. That's part of it when it comes to corporate America. However, there's also another aspect of it where a lot of people somewhat don't really pay too much attention to, and that is the part of it of yourself, who you are as a person, and how you're going to navigate the system regardless of the obstacles that are being presented to you. So that's something that I've directed my career, and also things that I've done not necessarily within the work aspect, but through volunteerism and just wanting to move ahead and to help people, including myself, in the process to do better and to know that you're worthy and that you can elevate regardless of who you are out there.
That it's a beautiful story of persistency, and it has so many lessons that are incredibly valuable. So thank you so much. I see Latoya has been agreeing with what you said. So if you mind, will you share how this experience has been for you?
Absolutely. I was nodding emphatically because I completely related to the whole entire journey. Um, from often being the only person of color, being the only woman in the room, whether it was in my graduate school program. Since I did not pursue a master's with Baruch, I know I'm still remiss in regards to that. Or even in the seats that I've sat in to date. It has definitely been a consistent story throughout my whole entire career, and understanding, how to not apologize for that, but figure out how you can actually use that seat that you've had, no matter where it is. Completely to what Paula has stated, there's something that we can each do, no matter what position that we're in, once we are in these different rooms, to make sure that we are opening the doors for people wider and wider with each and every single step. And so whether that's actually coaching, coming back to conversations like this, or, really questioning some of the hiring decisions when you actually get the opportunity to do so. So I guess that's why I was absolutely nodding emphatically. And then just making sure that we use our time wisely. We definitely want to make sure that we're growing and we're succeeding, because that's how we can continue to allow others to do the same in our paths. But it also means taking that time. I remember volunteering at a library after work, getting like 12 hours. And it's just like, nope, I have to take that time to volunteer as a career coach at the library to make sure that I can help others. And it's all about what you place your time and your effort into.
Thank you so much. I think it's very beautiful how you frame that through community service, through giving back, you also allow yourself to grow. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's very beautiful. Do you have a different perspective? I know you came into the room with this question in mind. So will you mind sharing how was your experience in this case?
I'll try and answer a little differently and compliment the other fabulous panelists. To answer the question in its simplest form, I would have more money if, in terms of my racial path. I would have had more job security. I would have had less stress. I would have been more comfortable socializing at the bars that I went to in order to play the politics that are critical to success in any industry. I may or may not have mentored to the same degree. I may or may not have done some of the other elements, but I don't know that my life, the racial aspects of my life would have prepared me in my teens and young adult life for the resilience that was required, whether they be the hours, whether they be the death by 1,000 cuts. So I'll go into that a little bit. I have been, as a vice president, directed to the mailroom because they assumed that I work in the mailroom staff. I have been ignored in meetings because they didn't think I was the senior person and a senior person in the room, even though I was older looking than all my peers and counterparts that they weren't familiar with. I have had my recommendations questioned, not because they weren't sound and there wasn't research and data, because you have to make sure your data and research is on point, but because I couldn't possibly be that smart to have layered in all of that thinking. So someone else must have told me or helped me or did it for me. Those are the microaggressions that I think people need to be prepared for, and that come into play from a racial path. So I'll phrase it and answer it that way.
Definitely. Thank you guys so much. I had a question that I want to ask all three of you, especially in regards to, because I'm a senior and this question is essential to us graduating seniors. So when young professionals are deciding on companies to work for or to apply to work for, what are some tips on how to assess inclusive environments or companies that support diversity?
Well, I'll go first if there's a pause. I work in the advertising industry, or one of the industries I work in is advertising. So you could definitely go to Fishbowl, because that's one of the industries that it encompasses, and look for the responses there. And then Fishbowl is an app that where people just brainstorm and talk about different things, and it has subgroups, whether it lacks in advertising or media or creatives or questions about salary. Um, there are elements like Glassdoor, and Glassdoor occasionally will have specific elements tied to diversity where you can get a sense of those elements. If you do and here is where I will say, if you ask for a present for your birthday, for graduation, ask for LinkedIn Premium. And LinkedIn Premium will give you two things. LinkedIn Premium will give you access to design thinking and learning and stuff like that that's in practice across organizations that give you that insight and knowledge. But it also gives you access to up to 15 premium requests and in-mails for people you don't know, right? So you can research, let's say you're interested in Obama's foundation, right? Let's say you just want to work within, and getting access to, you might not know anybody who works there, but you can send out emails to the people who work there that are more likely to be seen or break through because of premium than not. And I say this and I reinforce it, treat it like a baseball player. A baseball player will go to the Hall of Fame stinking it up 70% of the time. So if you have a 30% success rate in baseball, you will be in the Hall of Fame. From a batting perspective, you have to have the same mindset. Oh, well, I sent it to 2 people and nobody responded. Wrong mindset. That's a defeatist mindset. You should be sending it out to 10 people, 15 people, because 3 will respond. And that amplification from those 3 will definitely be critical. And the last part I'll put in that, tied to LinkedIn, is join the groups. There are groups on LinkedIn and Facebook and Slack that you can find, and you can, I say, my answer to half the questions are go to the Google. So you can get a lot of insights in regards to, everything from NABA to groups that you've never heard of that can give you insight and perspective in regards to minority perspective, general market perspective, whatever the case, individual perspective, minorities as junior level employees, right? Which is going to be different than senior level sometimes. So there are tons of resources if you follow some of those paths.
And I would like to add to that. One thing that we often overlook when we're on college campuses is where we are. Baruch, the resources there, it's infinite, especially the alumni network. If you see a company, you go on LinkedIn and maybe you're not comfortable, ask someone who is an alumni that probably works there, or maybe even know someone who works there. And that is how you would get a lot of inside information, because oftentimes if it's a recruiting conversation, you will not get the inside information of exactly what is going on. Also, interns, especially an intern that interned at a company maybe the spring before or the summer before and decided to get an offer somewhere else, they're a good resource. They're not invested in that firm, and they'll be able to tell you openly and candidly what it is like to work there, and especially have that uncomfortable conversation with you because they're not invested in the firm. As well as look at the senior leaders, look at companies who made a statement about what was happening in the environment last year. And what did they say also? And not only that, what are those companies currently doing? Because a lot of companies, they talk and say that there needs to be changes, but they did not act on that. So look at what the companies are doing. There are often press releases out regarding what company gave donation, who they gave it to, who decided to have a scholarship fund. For example, at JP Morgan, they're doing a lot in that aspect, in where they have initiatives both internally and externally to help the community in general, as well as members of staff. And that's public information. So utilize, as Al said, utilize the internet, utilize Google and research. There's so much information out there.
I 100% agree with everything that was stated. So the only thing that I would really add in regards to key resources that I know I've used outside of just like talking to friends and people who were familiar with the companies that I was researching, I do a lot of work with government organizations or people who have government contracts. And so it's very, very easy to see who's actually putting their numbers and their money behind what they're saying. You can look at different MWBE certifications, how many of them actually hire MWBEs, and usually they would have a statement around MWBEs being minority women-owned and business enterprises. If they are hiring those, they usually have some sort of stipulations within their internal practices stating that they have to. So I look at organizations who are partnering with those very closely. And then if it's a nonprofit, they have to report on almost everything. So I look straight at their 990s, which are their nonprofit financials, to see who's on their staff, who's on their board, and it tells me a lot really quickly. And so I usually go straight to the financials and where they're investing their money to get a better sense of where they're doing.
Thank you so much, everyone. I think this is incredibly useful information that we need to write down and make sure that we follow the steps. So thank you so much. So I have a follow-up question. You're very wise and we're very grateful to have you here. But would you consider yourself a role model for young Black individuals who are trying to make it in the professional world? Paula, will you mind starting this question?
I would like to think so. And upon graduating from Baruch, I decided to join NABA professionally, the professional chapter. And we have several committees, and I decided to work with the students because that's my passion. So for the last 8 years or so, I've been actively involved with doing a lot of workshops and presentation and facilitating a lot of events as it relates to personal and professional development, mainly for college students. And some of the topics that we cover are resume building, networking, interview skill, what's hot in the industry right now. So giving back in terms of helping college students to navigate college. And not only that, once you graduate, how can you land a great job and also remain employed within the area of study that you pursued. So I would like to think so. I guess maybe I would, in order to get a more honest answer, it wouldn't come from me. It would have to come from the students that I mentor and work with through the organization or elsewhere.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Alba, now we like to share your experience with, do you feel a mentor? Will you consider yourself a mentor for young Black professionals?
Um, so I'll answer it a bunch of different ways. The short answer is yes, because I have a range of mentees, but I have 100-pound female Asian mentees, I have Jewish mentees, I have Black and Hispanic mentees. I will have spoken to Black, Hispanic, Asian, and Jewish by the end of this week in the last 2 weeks, right? So I'm talking to all of them all of the time. I'm also a mentor, if you want to phrase it that way, because I also tell them what not to do where I dropped the ball. So it's all a matter of perspective in regards to what you identify as an ideal role model or mentor. But that role model is where you want to aspire. And then I try and get them to stand on my shoulders. So I try to tell them where I might have tripped up on a step or a situation. I suggest that they network more than I did in my career. I'm a social person, sometimes even engaging, but I didn't network for my career as much as I would have. I didn't always get an internal champion in a company that would help to elevate myself in that company. It happened in some companies and that worked out well, and then it didn't in others, and because I didn't put in the work and I didn't put in the effort. So I'm trying to also be that insight, um, where they can be greater than me and not only just be a role model. So the goal is for them to get to X level, whatever success is defined as, and then to ideally surpass that or at least have a smoother path.
Thank you so much for sharing. That truly sounds like giving back, and we're grateful for people like you who share not only the good part but also the things that you messed out, so we can take advantage of that. So thank you. Latoya, do you have an experience where you felt a mentor, or will you consider right now a mentor for young Black individuals?
In my opinion, I think that there are two very different distinctions between being a mentor versus being a role model. I would consider myself a mentor. I would not consider myself a role model. Um, I feel as though there are a lot of different things to what I'll just stated that, I could have done better. Um, I'm very bad at balancing work and other things. And so I wouldn't really consider myself a role model, but I try to share insight. And I think that that is where a mentor really comes into play, because this is somebody who can really help to coach you, share information, and kind of be that confidant that you might need that's external to your immediate environment. Um, so I would definitely absolutely state that I am that, and that I continue to actually not only help people who reach out to me, but figure out different ways that I can help others, whether they're students or actual like business professionals. I do a lot with entrepreneurs, and I feel as though they also need a lot of mentoring, especially Black entrepreneurs. And so I do my best to seek out ways that I can continue to support and help them to grow and thrive.
Just to add to my commentary, um, a mentor and a role model are distinct and different, but a person who gives back on a regular basis while still being flawed can be a mentor and a role model. So I will vehemently disagree with Latoya that she can't be a role model, because from a moral character, which is where more of our moral role models should be, she may be flawed, but she is high character, at least in this aspect, and therefore should be considered a role model, at least in this aspect.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'll
Oh, look,
reevaluate my
blushing.
statement.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that. On that topic, one of the greatest lessons I've learned during my time at Baruch is how to be a leader. Sometimes that's one of the hardest lessons to ever learn in any capacity. So my question to our audience is, well, our guest panel is, what leadership lesson would you want to leave us all with?
I'll start. It's kind of like love languages, right? So I don't know if you're familiar with love languages, where basically people are broken up into 5 types in terms of how they best receive love. That also applies in work. And what I would suggest people do is they take as many personal assessments as they can. There are Hogan assessments, and there's Pymetrics, and there's the one with INTG. I mean, there's the 16 personalities. There's a bunch of, and there's DISC. There's a bunch of assessments, and some of them are free. And what it does is it helps you to identify your personality type, which you might know, but it also tells you, oftentimes the good ones, the shortcomings that come from that. I am a D. I am a alpha-ish, direct, tell it like it is. And I also don't need a lot of words of affirmation, right? Which my boss probably thinks that's great. However, I have managed in the past in the same way. And that was a shortcoming in terms of my leadership, because I didn't give, I would say, great job, did fabulous, all right, next project. But I didn't necessarily pause enough for and provide the degree of words of affirmation that worked best for my team and the individuals on that team, because I worked or loved in the way that best fit me, and that doesn't work for everybody. So understanding your issues, and then also your shortcomings, right? Your blind spots is, I would say, is hugely critical in regards to, preparing for leadership opportunities in the future.
I 100% agree with that. I was literally just having a conversation with a nonprofit that I'm helping to coach right now about the exact same things in regards to how to actually enhance their internal operations and increase leadership within their organization. The leaders have to know where they're coming from, although if there's a possibility, and if there's funding, hopefully you'll also get the opportunity to get a better sense of where the staff are coming from as well. Because knowing what that mix within your organization in regards to different leadership styles, communication styles, and what people actually need in order to get their best work done is something that takes time and effort. And any way you can kind of speed along that process, which a lot of these assessments allow you to do, makes it that much easier to be a leader. I know that that's not always the case when you're like coming in the door and you're just like, this is who I am. I'm not the head of an organization and I can't mandate all of my staff take this. But I feel as though one of the things that I'll mention in regards to being mindful of just like how you engage with conversations, and really start doing that critical assessment after you engage with any conversation. It could be a personal one, or it could be one in the professional field, learning how you communicate, what type of role and position you typically take will give you a lot of insight in regards to how to operate. Similar to Al, I'm very much a directive style. I've had to pull back and learn how to shut up in meetings as a result of, I want to make sure that my staff have the opportunity to tell me what they need to tell me. And that was a learning lesson. For other people, it might be to step forward, completely depending upon what type of individual you are. But I don't believe, and one thing that I would definitely take away from this is there's no one right form of being a leader. It's really about how are you communicating, how are you listening, and how are you making sure to your best degree that you actually are able to bring as many perspectives to the table. For me, that is what being a leader is, and these personality techniques and understanding your shortcomings are the need to get there.
And I would like to add something else, which is similar to what you all were saying, in terms of one, I think it's important to invest in your growth. But while you're doing that, it's also important to be authentic to who you are. So being your true authentic self. Don't pretend to be someone that you're not, but also ensure that you are of that growth mindset. And communication, it is key, because as a leader, you need to understand your team and their style of communication in order to lead them and in order to have the synergy that is necessary for a team to be successful.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing your amazing takeaways, and Paula actually, all of you for sharing the importance of having communication, listening to your team, and giving feedback. With that said, I have a special question, a more direct question for Paula. And as a graduating senior, I am in the process of applying to grad school, hoping to get in. And I'm sure that many people are right now. I think this is a wonderful time to go back to school. So I want to learn a little bit about your experience in grad school. I want to know, what was the moment in your career that you decided it was a good thing to go back to school? And why or how do you decide to get both programs, an MIA and an MS? And how having these two degrees help your career and has helped you as give you more growth, more opportunity?
Sure, absolutely. When I started Baruch, as I mentioned earlier, I came to the US as an immigrant. So I was an international student, and I was in the process of getting permanent residency after I worked my first year. However, you know how the immigration process is. It takes forever. So that was delayed. I knew that I love economics. I majored in economics at Baruch for undergrad, and I knew that it was something that I loved, economics and finance. So after working, I wasn't able to get another work permit based on my immigration status. So I was left with a few options, and I decided to choose the best one. My options were stay in the country as an undocumented immigrant, 2, go back to Jamaica, or change my immigrant status to student. So I decided to do that. And that was why I went to Brooklyn College to do my master's in economics. Fast forward to my MBA program. It was somewhat of a similar story. My immigration situation took forever to be processed. So after working at Bank of America, I was left with those same options. I also knew that although I had a master's, MS in economics and finance, I wanted to advance my career to be in a leadership role in corporate America, or even the entrepreneurship avenue. And I realized that in order to do that, it would be feasible for me to have an MBA. And I also decided to do strategic management based on that, because it's a degree that's broad, but it's more geared towards management, how to manage an organization, a company from all aspects, from finance, human resources, the service that you're providing, or the product that you're providing. So that is why I decided to have both. How have these helped me? One, my first master's, it helped me to land a great job at Bank of America. Now with the MBA, to be honest, I know that from an entrepreneurship standpoint, a lot of entrepreneurs might dismiss formal education, especially an MBA, but I think it's somewhat critical to have an MBA or at least do some of those courses if you want to be an entrepreneur. Believe it or not, economics, that's one of the key things in business because it teaches you so much about demand, supply, products, services, pricing, profit, almost a gamut of things. So that is my background. Being in college for my master's, both of them, it was somewhat difficult. But if you went through Baruch for undergraduate, I think that at the master's level, it's almost similar. Yes, the courses might be a little bit more advanced or probably not, but as long as you have that frame of mind and that mindset where you're going to study, you're going to pay attention in classes, you're going to do the assignments, you're going to write your papers, it's the same thing. And I think even if you want to go to do your PhD, the foundation of Baruch is essential because regardless of what you're going to study, master's, MBA, PhD, having that discipline, that consistency, that dedication to be on top of the game when it comes to your studies, that is all that matters. And it depends on what you want to do. I think for people that want to be in a managerial role in corporate America, it's great to have an MBA because a lot of the companies for senior management roles, even if you do not have it when you're interviewing for it or you're already in the company, to get to that senior executive level, most of the times they're going to ask you for it. For a master's, if you want to be in a specific field, it's great to have a master's in that area. So it all depends on your level of study.
Thank you, Paula. That's a perfect segue into my next question for you, Ms. Latoya. So in regards to graduate degrees, masters, do you feel that a Baruch education prepared you well enough for an Ivy League education? And do you have any advice for Baruch students who aim to go to an Ivy League graduate program?
I would say, and this is a very hard question for me to answer because I've been definitely debating it for quite some time post graduating from Columbia. I would say Baruch somewhat prepared me for it. It prepared me for the amount that I would have to study. Getting my bachelor's degree at Baruch while simultaneously doing like 50 million other projects, Ingrid knows I was, as well as Paula, I was all over campus. So having to balance so many things just came so easy to me. It was something that I'm pretty sure many of our Baruch students completely understand. You have a job, you're in school, you're probably also part of a student organization or two or three. So that wasn't a hard part for me to transition. Actually, what became hardest was something that Al actually hit on earlier, and that was all of a sudden, I went from being with students who completely understood my background. A child of immigrants, came from Barbados, the first person in my whole entire family to get a bachelor's degree, to going into an environment where that was just completely unheard of. I'm all of a sudden the only Black person in my whole entire class. There were very few Caribbean / I don't think any, with the exception of me, Caribbeans who were actually part of my program. So that took a large emotional and mental shift. And I also had to be prepared for the fact that the professors didn't understand my perspective, why I wanted to study certain topics, why they were so innately important to me. And I'm experiencing that even now. I'm back in school again, glutton for punishment, apparently, at NYU. And I will say that the problem is even more so challenging because I'm now getting a master's of science in urban informatics and data science. I'm literally the only Black person that I've seen in any of my classes at all. And so it just takes a lot emotionally. And you feel as though you have to like constantly defend if you want to study or do work or research around Black communities and explain what the nuances are that you're trying to evaluate to professors.
Thank you, Latoya, for sharing your experience. And I'm glad to hear that you're back to school. That's wonderful. And some of the things that you said are really, really powerful. I'm also a immigrant and Caribbean student, and I understand that not always I have the privilege to feel my professors understand my perspective, and it's challenging. So thank you for sharing that. So speaking of challenges, I have a question for all, and it's precisely about your film, which is marketing. And we know that it's a very competitive field and it's very hard to get opportunities. So I want to ask you if you have any advice or you have any experience that you want to share on how to stand up in this very competitive area.
Sure. The first part I would say is do your research. Do your research in regards to the company. Do your research in regards to who you're going to interview. The same way you could stalk your ex, you could definitely, go into and get information about the prospective employer. Know news about the company. The first company I ever worked for was Young and Rubicam, and the CEO is Peter Georgescu. It's spelled a little funky, right? Not easy to pronounce. That was in the 90s. And I still remember it to this day because I was prepared to have a conversation about him based off articles I read at a physical library for Ad Age that didn't live online that I researched and going through stuff, which preceded microfiche on a screen. You don't even know what that is, right? And I don't want to do the, oh, I walked up 3 miles to school uphill both ways, right? I don't want to be that guy. But one of the things that I am a passionate champion about Baruch is the grit. And grit is one of the keys to the skills of 2020 and beyond, right? The new age, right? It's collaboration and it's emotional intelligence, and there's 10, 12, 15, 20, depending on who you're talking to. But grit is one of them. And the working 20 hours or sometimes full time and going to school at the same time and a coursework that every student that I know that's come from another school has said is that's a hard school. So I think grit is hugely critical. So, and I'll actually activate Kyle in this. Kyle, I need you to finish the following sentence for me.
I'll try.
It's not what you know, it's
Who you know.
Oh my goodness, right? So you have the information. Again, and I sound like I work for the company, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Google, you can follow someone, a company, a CEO, search for videos on YouTube, whatever the case may be. And that's how you find out how to spell or pronounce somebody's name, right? You know how to pronounce it by watching the YouTube videos when they get introduced. Hopefully they got introduced correctly. See what's important to them, what they're talking about, right? Whether it be about diversity, whether it be about their challenges, and it's in regards to conversation. But, and we can have a whole separate conversation about best practices in networking, because you just told me that it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? How do you introduce yourself? What do you talk about? The short answer is be straightforward. I'm a student. I want a job. You stand out because we have this person in common, because you went to my school, because you did this, because you that. I like to travel, whatever, right? Talk about what you like, talk about what you don't like, but build some type of camaraderie, and from there, move forward. They know what you want, right? So don't delay the process. Hey, saw your profile. We have mutual connection, and then by the way, graduating senior interested in having a informational interview with you to talk about XYZ or your company or your journey. Because lastly, all of that is a compliment. All people hear is you think I'm important, right? And so as a compliment, most people will react, or most people will communicate in that aspect.
Thank you so much for sharing that. As a person that struggles with networking, because I feel like I'm always bothering the next person, I appreciate to know that people are flattered when we approach them. So trust me, you're giving me a lifesaver advice, and everyone. I hope that everyone can highly benefit from this. So we still have 3 minutes. If our audience have any questions for the speaker, this is the perfect time to ask them.
I have a question. Um, what would you say is, I spoke a little bit about that. I felt like leadership was the greatest lesson I learned in my Baruch experience, like outside of the classroom. What would you say is the greatest lesson you've learned from your experience at Baruch?
I think for me, the greatest lesson that I've learned is resilience and perseverance. So never giving up. I remember I failed pre-calculus, and then after retaking it, I got an A. So that says a lot about my journey, and just having my eyes on the prize, and that regardless of how hard it is, to just push through. As I was talking about the grit, just push through, because there's always a saying, and I know a lot of people have been saying it recently, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and there truly is one. So that's it for me. Resilience, perseverance, having that grit and pushing forward.
I would say the STAR program folks are fabulous. I've worked with them for over a decade. What I can say though is Baruch is a CUNY, so it runs a little bit lean, and it doesn't, and it forces you to be a little bit accountable, a little bit, self-reliant in those aspects, and it kind of and again, not having a campus and all that other stuff, it kind of reinforced, an element of that resilience, of that grit, that I got to find my part-time job. I got to fit these classes into a funky schedule while commuting from an outer borough. I got to take these summer classes or these one-offs, at night, where I'm interacting with adults, who are, talking about their kids, at the same time that I have another class in freshman orientation or whatever the case may be. So it throws the real world at you, especially being in New York, in a way that University of Ohio may not.
I guess the only thing I have to add, and trying to loop in the question that I see that came through the chat simultaneously, I don't really believe, at least not from my perspective, Baruch students have ever had a problem with grit. We're go-getters. We decided to do this as a result of like just how hard we want to pursue it. And when I've sat in hiring rooms, that was never something that we ever had to really question in regards to the students from Baruch. It was just there. We will do what we have to do in order to get there, which I appreciate. As I said before, that has allowed me to push hard and fast and get out into positions a lot sooner than anybody would have probably thought that I'd be able to get to in my career. but you do have to constantly counter these questions, such as the one that we see here in the chat in regards to people constantly just stating that you didn't get the position because basically you weren't the right fit. And so I've definitely heard that so many times in the past, especially since I know people look at me, I look young, which sadly is a little bit of a detriment sometimes. I'm grateful. Like, thank you, genetics and my Caribbean heritage. But when I'm going for executive director positions, I hear that often. In regard to the first thing they always ask me about is my experience. And so some of the things that I've said when people are saying that that was just the hiring decision that they chose to make, was I go back, figure out who I need to talk to see, is there any way I can get some feedback? Most people don't take the time to reach back out to their hiring managers or anybody who was part of that selection process to say, hey, you know what are some additional skills that I could potentially get? Can we have a conversation? Really, so that if they're going to come at you saying there was another best person, I'm like, fine, there was another best person. Let's continue the conversation. Maybe I'll be the best person for your next position. And so there have been often times that I didn't get the role I applied for, but I got another one because I went back and I had those conversations and I didn't let that statement deter me, although it can be hard, especially when you worked so much to get where you were, for somebody to say it's still not enough. But take it and take that feedback.
I know we're over it, but I want to address this question in the chat from a multitude of angles. People hire who looks like them. And if you're in a hiring position, and it's comfort, it is natural. It is not racist. There are racist people, but it is not racist. It is not sexist. I can hire another male if I'm a white male, because if occasionally I want to tell a joke about my wife, it's not offensive. Someone can relate to my time I'm going to be over stereotypical, on the rowing team or in the tennis club. I can have these conversations and they relate and they get me. They went to my school in Hamilton, small school in New York, upstate, and they get me. Everybody, we all are surrounded by people that get us, right? But what happens is you can't confine it to that comfort level. Secondly, there is a percentage of racist and sexist people in the world. I don't know what that number is, but I'll throw out some other numbers. In the last 100 years, the majority of our presidents are over 6 foot. Do you think, and when I say the majority, I want to say, okay, we've had what, 45, 46 presidents. I'm going to say comfortably 40 are over 6 foot. And if you talk about key leaders in different situations and why they won, George Washington won, if you go back in history, not what everybody else tells you. He lost 3 out of 11 battles, major battles, right? He was a loser. If our last president were to describe him. He was 6'4". He was 6'4", and he was the least jerk available, because Thomas Jefferson was a jerk, but he ended up being president after, right? Abraham Lincoln was 6'4", right, during a crucial time period, and that's, considering where he came from, he shouldn't have been president, right? Mitt Romney is viewed as an ideal. He looks like he should be president, right? So people already go in with a perception of what it should be. There are candidates, and you guys don't know them, and it's a shame, but there's Michael Dukakis, and there is, who was the guy with the ears, the businessman?
Ross Perot.
Ross Perot, right? Who was the equivalent of Michael Bloomberg today, right? Little Mike is our former president like to call him. And he just didn't exude presidency. But part of why Obama won, in my opinion, is he was taller than McCain. He was taller and looked more vibrant. If you had to pick the two, you would want that guy because he projects power and physical dominance. That's going to be hard for a woman to win because a tall woman is intimidating and they only give her a cap. And so it's going to be hard for a woman to be president. It's going to, in addition to the sexism, right? It's going to be hard for a 5'8" person to be president. Not because they're not the smartest person and most capable. It's because people have preconceived notions and they limit, and some of it is overt and racist and misogynist, and some of it is less insidious than that, but it is the reality of the world that we live in. So until people go in and they actively confront and they say, I have to include 20% of my pool needs to be a minority, and you extend the pool that way, or you say 40% of my pool at least needs to be women, because the law of averages says this should at least be my consideration pool, and the talent acquisition folks and recruiters and headhunters adhere to that, then we will still continue down this path, because diversity, equity, and inclusion has been going on with some kind of serious, moderate, I'll call it moderate effort, for 10 years, if not 20, and the numbers haven't changed because the process hasn't changed. You hire your friends and nephews and godkids, which makes sense. That's what I would do if I was in charge. But that's going to result in less jobs, and then no one wants conflict. People don't acknowledge that. We are conflict averse. So people want, so if I'm going to get somebody whose countrymen are known as hot-blooded, or Caribbean folks, right? This whole panel is of Caribbean descent, first generation or second generation. And what's the thing about us? You can hear us before you see us. Or we're huggers, and some people might be introverted and not into that. There are cultural cues that make us better. That's the story of America. But for a lot of people, it is uncomfortable. And then there are conversations about, if you do make that joke or that inappropriateness, that you might get fired for. So I don't want to get fired from my high-paying job, so I'm going to pick the person who is least likely to sue me. Like all of these are reasonable stuff, separate from what I will reinforce and say, separate from the racism and misogyny that already exists, right? So not all of it is exactly that, but it ends up being the same. Sorry, getting off the soapbox now.
Thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom and a very hard to hear but very realistic perspective in the hiring process. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone who joined us today, especially to our amazing panelists. I received so much from this panel, and I hope that everyone who's here and that will later watch this recording will be able to learn as much as we did. Thank you so much a million times. I'm adding the YouTube information where the video will be posted later, so those who want to share can share it. And thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks to everyone. This has been fantastic.
Bye-bye.
Yes, thank you. Great to see everyone. Take care.
Stop the recording. Yeah.